All right, the two tight end attack didn't work out the way some thought it would be back in 2023, but the two tight end attack is still in play. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast. I'm Kevin Carroll.
And I'm Jon Scott. An interesting position group to discuss, probably the first where there's not a whole lot of expected change to the players in the tight end room. Right. It's more of a conversation of maybe are there any financial types of moves made, looking mainly at Dawson, Knox. The incorporation of both of them moving forward now with Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator officially. And do they maybe try to backfill? They have a Quentin Morris exclusive rights free agent, but do they try to maybe find another younger person to round out the room? It's interesting, but this may be one of the shorter ones we go through in terms of breaking down each position on the Bills heading into the offseason.
Yeah, quick and to the point. You have Dawson Knox with his new deal that is way up there. You and I have talked about him as one of the candidates on the team to get a restructure type of deal. And, of course, Kincaid is only going into his second year. And as you pointed out, Quentin Morris, their free agency, but the money isn't too big. And he's generally part of what they do on offense. He has a role that I think that's just going to remain your three guys there. What Joe Brady does with him or all of them, you think differently on what Joe Brady was doing with Ken Dorsey's offense. And maybe he has a better spin on what can be done with both Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid out there, and Quentin Morris just plays his role as the blocking tight end.
As the season went on, and you saw what Dalton Kincaid did without Dawson Knox and even with Dawson Knox, there's a portion of the fan base is like, all right, get Knox out of here. So that's why we just need to present it as it's almost an impossibility. Right. In terms of his contract, our friends at Spot Track have it as should the Bills even exercise the thought of getting rid of Dawson Knox this offseason, over $20 million in dead cap, and they still would lose $6 million on the salary cap. So it would be one of the worst possible decisions you could ever make to simply get rid of him. Trading him, it's still 11.7 in dead cap. You're only saving 2.6. So Dawson Knox is not going anywhere. That's where the conversation just needs to shift over the offseason. And again, this is one of the questions that will not be answered until probably October at this point, of how could you best utilize a guy that is carrying a $14.3 million cap hit to not simply be relegated to a predominantly blocking tight end while utilizing your first-round pick that you traded up for a year prior as your main person in the passing game. I don't want the Bills to go back to this 60%, 70%, 12 personnel.
Right.
I just think they got to find some way to utilize both, because I think Knox, while still inconsistent catching the football, can be utilized as a weapon in the passing game. He's made it clear, while not being disruptive, he's voiced his desire to be more involved in the passing game. And so the pieces are there. That's what makes it interesting. And honestly, not to go too far back, but it's one of the main contentions I had with the Dalton Kincaid pick when it was made.
Right, and I remember you making that. And Dawson Knox, John, inconsistent catching the ball aside, he has made some key plays, some big plays for the Bills. He is really on the same page with Josh Allen. So Josh Allen does trust him. Of course, Kincaid going into his second year, you never know what's going to happen. I just think Knox being there, that there's still Dalton Kincaid still growing as an NFL player. You would look at Dawson Knox as he's been around a while. I mean, I think the guy has scored the first touchdown in the playoffs every year they've gone. So he's there, and Josh Allen trusts him, like I said. So while I'm with you as the offense progressed under Brady, I think they were able to do more with not having the two tight ends out there like they were trying so hard early on to force it. I mean, heck, for the last few years, John, going into the season, that has been a talking point of what would this Bills offense look like with two tight ends that can be threats. And when it was presented out at the beginning of the season, like I said, I think it was forced. It didn't work out. Dawson Knox get injured. Kincaid starts to go up. Knox returns. And now we started to see more of a role on having the two either out there at the same time or mixing and matching.
And this is where if Kincaid can continue to take steps forward as a blocker and Knox can continue to try to shore up his hands and be more consistent catching the football, that's where 12 personnel, I think, becomes more impactful. When you have two tight ends, that maybe Kincaid will always be the better pass catcher and Knox will always be the better blocker, but you don't necessarily have to key in and say, well, which one's going to stay in? Which one's going to run the routes? Which one's going to do what? If both can continue to round out their games better, I think it can be better utilized here. Of course, then there was the whole conversation of when Brandon Beane, the night that Kincaid was drafted, referred to him as a big slot. And now with the emergence of Khalil Shakir, that also kind of complicates things because you seem to have found a solid slot receiver that you'd been searching for since Cole Beasley. You could still mix and match with formations and all of that. And again, these are answers that won't be seen in OTAs or minicamp or even training camp or preseason. You're not going to see the full deck out on the table from Joe Brady until a month plus into the season at least. That's just kind of where it is. You're stuck. I mean, the Bills committed to two tight ends. They got to make it work in some capacity. Going back to the money with Knox, Spot Track Michael Giannetti put out there on January 22nd that the Bills can process a $5 million roster bonus conversion on Knox, and that'll free up $4 million of cap, factoring in 2 void years. That's just basically, for layman's terms, they convert a bonus and free up $4 million of cap space, maneuvering the contract and things that you and I are too stupid to frankly understand.
I'm just listening to you.
So that's where the money side of things goes. And then, yeah, we can transition here into Quentin Morris, an exclusive rights free agent. I think they like him. Then they like having guys that they can develop. He's big on the special team side of things. They trusted him in certain instances when Knox was out and even when Kincaid was out to throw him in there. He's not heavily involved when he's out there. He's capable, but as a third tight end,
but it's not like he can't catch. I mean, we've seen him.
He was awesome in training camp. Arguably top 3 most impressive people on the offensive side of the ball. And you just never talk to him because all the focus is on Kincaid and then certainly Dawson Knox.
And I mean, I still remember very vividly against the Dolphins on that night game, not this past season, but last season, Allen throws a ball to the end zone. You see this tight end make this great catch. I thought it was Dawson Knox. He gets up and he's wearing number 85, and you're like, wow, I didn't know Quentin Morris could come up with a play like that.
Exactly. Then the only question is, I think the days of keeping 4 tight ends on the active roster, they used to do that with Lee Smith and when they didn't necessarily have the horses in that room. I think those days are over. You want to distribute roster spots maybe more in the defensive line and the secondary, even at wide receiver. So I think you got 3. They love competition. So even if they bring back Quentin Morris as an exclusive rights free agent, low cost, do you think they should go out and get someone, I don't want to say of note, but maybe that you know of, whether it be a low signing free agent or even using a day 3 selection in the draft to try to find another new person that maybe if they moved on from Knox in a couple years, it's like, okay, we got Kincaid, we've developed this young player for a couple years, and boom, the ship can continue to go steady.
I'm good either way. I mean, go get someone on day 3 of the draft. Why not? Like, they have a ton of picks, so why not? I was looking at some of the free agents out there. I would think, John, and this is just from covering this team as long as we have, it sounds like they'd bring in a tight end that is willing to do like a 1-year deal to prove that I still have it and I'm still here to compete, but ultimately they'll end up getting cut before the season starts.
And they still have Zach Davidson is a guy that's been around the team, I think, a year and a half, 2 years, missed all of this season with an injury, practice squad type guy. This Trey McKitty, I believe, is a futures contract. They may solidify or satisfy this. Here's some extra camp bodies. Maybe if they hit lightning in a bottle, they can overcome Quentin Morris or something like that. But I don't necessarily know if anything or think anything of note is going to be added to this room unless there's some veteran that's like, hey,
Jimmy Graham is still...
Yeah. All he basically did was catch touchdowns for the Saints this past year. I think he had like 10 catches and 3 or 4 touchdowns. Unless it's a vet that's like, hey, I'll take a minimum contract. I just kind of want to be around a winner. Mm-hmm. That would be the only thing. But I still don't even know with the model the Bills have of develop guys, keep them in the system for a while. That's where Quentin Morris has been. They've somewhat reaped minor rewards of that cultivated growth. I don't think they'd be willing to say, hey, here's a 33-year-old vet that's signing for $1 million that would then cause us to lose Quentin Morris. I don't know about that, but it's with tight end in general, it's basically boils down to what, if anything, can they do with Dawson Knox's contract to make it less of a burden for a likely diminished role that he's going to have compared to when he signed the new contract. And then moving forward, how do the Bills and Joe Brady in particular figure out the best way to utilize 2 tight ends that, again, they're stuck with at least, in terms of Knox, at least through this season.
And who knows, maybe Brady gets it to work, but I think that about covers it as far as the tight ends go. I mean, it's the money, it's the wait and see what they do with Dawson Knox contract, and then we wait until next season to see how the two pan out with each other.
And that's why we told people some of these we can get quick. We got a longer one coming up in a little bit. We got offensive line next. Again, all 5 starters of that group played every single game this season. So it's not as much to talk about. There's a little bit of money and maybe, backfilling some of the depth. But then stick around in a day or so when we start getting on defense, and that's where the conversation really heightens.
It's fun. I'm going through O-line, D-line, and it's like the complete opposite conversation 100%. So we got that coming out. And out there, if you want to take a look for it, running back, quarterback, with the backup quarterback, Josh Allen's offseason. We'll get the defensive backs and linebackers as well. So for now, for Jon Scott, I'm Kevin Carroll. As always, thanks for joining us, everyone.